Much of the Seder and much of Pesach actually shapes around what the Torah tells us about Korban Pesach, the sacrifice that we make at Pesach, the offering of the animal that we make at Pesach. And when we talk about sacrifices in Judaism, we really do encounter a challenge of language. The word sacrifice in English is not really a direct translation of what the Torah is telling us. The Torah talks to us about a korban. The root of the word is to draw near, a closeness, an offering, a nearness offering. We don't really have language for that in English. And it will get translated as sacrifice because of the process, because we're bringing an animal and the animal will be sacrificed. But what happens is we start to confuse the meanings because the word sacrifice and the word nearness, a nearness offering, actually move in counter directions to each other. When I sacrifice something, I'm giving something up. That's what the word sacrifice means. But when I talk about a korban, when I'm talking about a nearness offering, an expression of drawing near and drawing close, I'm not giving something up. I'm gaining something. And so each of those words are going to move in opposite directions to each other. And depending on which language we're dealing with, we will get a different message. So when we look in the Torah and we understand, well, the Torah is talking about a korban. The Torah is talking about a nearness offering. We don't do sacrifices anymore. So we're going to look at what is the messaging that we're getting with this idea of bringing an offering of nearness. What am I gaining when I do that? If I say that, in fact, it's an expression of wanting to draw near, and especially when I'm talking about God, where how am I supposed to draw near? God has no physicality. I don't know a geography for God. God stands outside time. How am I doing this thing, this nearness offering, this drawing near? And so we look at the details that the Torah tells us, and we see what we can get from that. So the first thing that we want to look at is there's a technical side to it, and it's very meticulous in its detail of technique. But what I'm noticing, because the technique, again, we don't do sacrifices, so that's not where I'm going to sit for my meaning. I am noticing that when talking about it, it is also talking about two components. It says that, first of all, there will be a food component, because an animal is being cooked or grain is being baked. There will be a food component. And then we're told the food is going to go to the priests. It's to feed them. So there's a practical element to it as well. But then it talks about the smell. It talks about the aroma. And now it says that the scent of the offering will rise, will spread, and that to God it is, and it will always be translated as a pleasing smell. But you look in the Hebrew, and it's not saying pleasing. It says reach nichoach, a comforting smell. And it then uses the word that talks about memory and says this triggers a divine memory, that this scent triggers something in God, that God remembers something. And now these sacrifices, or more particularly these offerings, are doing something else. So there's the practical side that we're feeding people. That's wonderful. But now it's talking about what about the things we can't touch? What about the things like the scent and the aroma and the fragrance and the smell? What happens? That's an offering as well. And that's where we have the nearness that we're drawing into. When it talks about reach nichoach, it says that God is comforted by this smell and remembers something. So when I want to know what's the memory, what's being triggered, I'm going to go and look at the very first time that I saw that expression connected with sacrifice, and I'm going to end up with Noah. I'm going to end up in the book of Genesis when the entire world was in a horrible, horrible, miserable state of chaos, corruption, destruction, horrible things. And we're told God actually says, I regret this. I regret creating humanity. I regret what has happened to the vision of creation. And then we get the flood, and the flood is horrible. It's destructive. It's water used for death. It's everything that our nightmares are made of. Noah is in the ark with his family. When the flood ends, Noah comes out and offers an offering to God to draw near. And we see that expression for the first time, reach nichoach. That in fact, what now happens is, what Noah has done by drawing near is comforting God. The scent of it, the smell of it, is the comforting smell. And we actually, when we think about it, might be able to understand that moment. Noah reached out to draw near to God after a flood of destruction, when humanity could have turned to God and said, "You're done with me, I'm done with you." It was such a horrible, destructive time that for Noah to then reach to God and say, "But I can't. I must be near you. I want to be near you." And that's comforting. And now the new relationship can begin. And now the new world, so to speak, can set itself onto foundation. In spite of everything Noah witnessed, Noah reached out and wanted to draw near. It's the power of drawing near. It's why we look at it that way from the Hebrew side of the Torah. It's why we understand what we're doing when the Torah tells us this is what it means when you engage in these rituals. It also challenges my assumptions about God. Because when I enter the dialogue through understanding this is my reaching out, this is my drawing near, and then I recognize part of this is that comforting aspect that will reach God from my expression, I now challenge my assumptions. And I'm going to ask myself, why do I assume that the hard year I've had was only hard for me? Why do I assume that this did not impact the divine relationships with everybody? Why do I assume that we're on our own? Why do I assume there's nothing for me to do but wait? Why do I assume that I can't offer comfort into all my relationships, including my spiritual relationship? It changes every way I think about things. It opens doors because I'm no longer thinking about a sacrifice as food, and I'm no longer thinking about a sacrifice as something I gave up. I look at it and say, it isn't that. It's my effort to draw near. It's my effort to engage. It's my effort to be close to. The power of it happens when I stop thinking about it as a sacrifice. It happens when I engage in the language of the Torah, in what it's telling me it is. It, in fact, is not a sacrifice. I'm not giving anything up. It is my choice of drawing near, my power to choose to draw close, especially when physical closeness is impossible.